Thank you. Jeff, I think we'll move then into
Thank you.
the SIlica Sand update, or yeah, okay. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, what I would like to do is start out with welcoming everybody who's here from the public, representing their own interests, their local interests, representatives from SIlica Sand industry. Some of them are also here. And the fact that we've got a packed house tells me that our new communication noticing system is a rousing success. People can go to the EQB website, click on the little icon for notices, and sign up for notices on particular topics of their interest. A lot of people have done that. We encourage that every time we talk to somebody who sends us an email or calls on the phone. If you're interested in more, sign up for the notices. And that seems to be working, and that's a good thing. So one of the issues that came out of the, not to steal Kate's thunder, the improving environmental review was trying to get more communication with the public and things like that, and that's one of the issues that we took it on, and thanks to support from the Police Control Agency, our mother agency right now, if you will, that seems to be working really well. So I'm very glad that all these people signed up, heard about it. They should tell their friends and neighbors to sign up for that, anybody who's interested. So I wanted to start out with that because let's welcome people when we can and ask them to spread the word. So going from there, what I would like to do is do a quick sort of summary of what we've got here without trying to avoid redundancy from the chair's statement. Oops, wrong button, sorry. Okay, just want to do a quick review because there's an awful lot of confusion about just what these model standards are, what they're not. The legislation, House File 976, had quite a number of silica sand topics, mandates, projects that it created, and there seems to be a little merging in people's minds of these different projects. While they're all similar and related topics, they are very, very separate projects. First one, rulemaking, making rules on silica sand. The Environmental Quality Board, our rules are the Environmental Review Program, Minnesota Rules 4410. That's what we are ordered to consider. Not these other things. The PCA has their assignment, the DNR has its assignment, the Department of Health has its assignment. Now these rules, creating a formal rules that end up in Minnesota Rules 4410 or 6120 or whatever they might be. The process for that is laid out in state law, how those are created. That's chapter 14, Minnesota statutes. Anybody's interested, you need some bedtime reading. That is not what we're doing here, but a lot of people are confusing that. So we will be looking at the environmental review program if anything needs to change in that. Another assignment in the legislation is that the EAW must include an assessment of water resources when there's a potential for groundwater appropriation from the Department of Natural Resources. You might recall that we did adopt a new EAW form recently, and that form includes this requirement. So we'll check that one off. Technical Assistance Library, where the EQB is supposed to create a library of local government ordinances and permits. That is for reference for local governments so they can look and see what other people are doing. That's pending. We anticipate we'll have something online soon. New EAW thresholds for silica sand projects. This is also in the new legislation. That's one of the things that's assigned, and that's in effect. This part of the legislation, we will assemble a technical assistance team, and the model standards and criteria. So these are all different things that are in the legislation. They're all separate projects. And the question is, okay, what are we dealing with today? Okay, well, here's the thing. We're not dealing with the rulemaking. We're not dealing with the EAW, including assessments of water resources. We're not dealing with the permit library. We're not dealing with mandatory EAW thresholds. We're not dealing with the technical assistance team. We're talking about developing model standards here. And I do that just because there's a lot of confusion between these model standards and the rulemaking part of it. When you talk to people in state government, rulemaking means adopting state rules, adopting Minnesota rules, XYZ. Other people, rules means a lot of different things. There's a lot of confusion about that. Okay, so what we are doing right here is real briefly summarizing what the standards and criteria mandate is. By October 1st, consulting with local governments, develop model standards and criteria for mining, processing, and transporting silica sand. They may be used by local units of government in developing their ordinances. We're not writing an ordinance. We're writing standards that other governments, local governments can, if they wish, use as a basis for things to fold into their ordinance. A lot of misunderstanding about that too. And the other thing is that they have to be different for different geographic areas of the state, meaning the driftless area in the southeast part of Minnesota versus the Minnesota Valley area. Both are areas where silica sand is being mined, and our standards, once they get finished, need to distinguish between those two whenever possible. So, again, important points. There's no mandate. Local governments can adopt some, all, or none of what we end up with, or they can do something completely different. They are not required in any way to take our advice. Second, these are not new state agency regulations. These are not things that the EQB, like we had any authority to do anything to force anybody to do anything, but the DNR or the Pollution Control Agency or the Health Department, these are not things that they're going to adopt and enforce across the state. I hope that's clear to everybody, and if members of the board have questions about that, they can ask me about that to clarify. The table itself, the draft standards, first of all, and I didn't put across this, is you'll notice in your copy there's a big draft across it. It says draft in the bottom of every page. Nowhere near to being finished to something that we can finally say, yeah, this is it. Nowhere near there. The table itself, all right, left-hand column just lists the topics that are actually included in the legislation. Legislation says the model standards must include, and then goes down a big long list that takes up a page and a half on legal-sized paper. So that's what appears in the left-hand column of the table. The middle is the suggested standards and criteria as they stand right now in the draft. The right column, there's been a lot of confusion of that judging from some of the emails. This is really to help people who are reading this understand the reasoning behind what's in there. There are existing Minnesota rules out there for mining of different types. We looked at those and said, okay, that's a good starting point for some of these things. Some of the setbacks for metallic mining, for peat mining. These things have gone through public vetting, the official rulemaking process, so there was extensive consideration, discussion of them for those topics. Are those directly related? Should they be the things for silica sand mines? Let's find out. We don't know. It's a starting point for the discussion. General thoughts and notes, some things that I've heard from talking with local governments, other people, and the different statement on the different geographic areas, which ultimately would need to be folded into the whatever the formal standards are. But just a note on over there on which areas of the state this particular thing would apply to. For example, the first one in the table is setbacks from residential boundaries, or zoning district boundaries. There's the setbacks in the middle that are suggested at this time, as well as a thing that occurs in a lot of them is that we would be suggesting, recommending that local government actually require that these specific things be identified on the site survey, the site plan, the grading plan, whatever it is that different governments use, require different types of plans, maps, if you will, when they get applications on things. Somewhere on those, these different items should be identified. That's something that you'll see repeating throughout the table. Right-hand side, as I said, Minnesota rules 6130, 6131, and 6132. Those are for metallic mining and peat mining. Those were the starting point for looking at some of these setbacks to see if that might work for silica sand. Some people will say no, some people will say yes. Let's get that discussion going. The DNR did suggest that that's a good starting point for the discussion. Let's start with there and see where we go. And that these recommendations for the setbacks would be the same in both geographic areas of the state, both the driftless area and the Minnesota River Valley. Because the effect of, let's say, a sand mine on somebody's residential property, it's not really, well, the geology under the ground probably isn't going to affect how far it should be away from their house or from their property line. Let's talk about that. Let's see how that works. As the chair said, we have not had enough time for public review process. We definitely need to provide the public an opportunity to review. We need to consult with local governments. We need to consult with representatives of the industry. And we need to talk more with the state agencies. These all deserve more time than the October 1st deadline allowed us. However, we do have a draft. And so that was the, we have a draft prepared. We did develop standards. They're not finished, but we did get something done by October 1st. And I think that's important to the people who put the legislation together. So what we're suggesting as staff is a public review process, and this is not necessarily in any specific chronology, priority. These are just things that need to happen. As the chair said, we think that a subcommittee to oversee this process is a great idea. We want to meet with local governments. Bullet disappeared. Oh, there it is. Public meetings, similar to the August 2nd meetings for public participation in the process. Those seems to be have been well received. I think that might be a good venue for getting the public talking about things. We would like to meet with industry representatives. We want to set up meetings with them, just like we want to set up meetings with local governments. After that, we would review it, meeting staff, EQB staff, EQB subcommittee, staff from different agencies, and come up with something that we could adopt as a final version. At the same time, these standards and criteria, they can evolve. I mean, when we learn something new in 6 months, we should go back and say, we changed our mind. We think this particular standard should change to so-and-so. I think that's what we should expect to do. I think we should have periodic review and updates as seems appropriate. These things are not finite. The science is changing. The knowledge is changing all the time. And I think that if we say we're going to have something done and that's it, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not really serving the ultimate purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here. So that's what we're suggesting, and we would like some input from the board on how we want to put together the subcommittee. I guess there we can put together how the review process will happen. That's completely up to the board. But I just wanted to highlight some things that we think are important to touch on throughout this process, some things to accomplish as we go through the process. And with that, field any questions from the board?
Or comments regarding that discussion. I failed to acknowledge that Senator Matt Schmidt is here. Stand up, Matt. And I talked with Matt and asked him about us missing the October 1st deadline, given the fact that you had indicated that you were sure that they would have a concern regarding dates, and he said that would be a problem, and I said I would offer Jeff to go to jail on our behalf. And Bob's going in, yeah, so, and anyone else. So thanks for being here, Senator Schmidt. It's always good to see you. I know this is an important issue to you all. Questions, comments, Chair? Commissioner Stein?
Thank you. And Jeff, just thanks for the presentation. I also just want to acknowledge that in developing standards and criteria, some standards and criteria are numerically based. Other standards and criteria can be more performance or evaluative based on considerations of science and other factors. And I just wanted to make clear, you're not ruling out one or the other, or you're actually, by my read of this first draft, you've got kind of both approaches identified in there. There's times when additional data is going to be required to come up with an appropriate standard. For example, I think some of the groundwater protection standards are driven more in that sort of, you need more information to come to a conclusion on what an appropriate standard might be in a local ordinance. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, that's exactly right. Some of these things do not lend themselves to one-size-fits-all quantitative standards. The one that immediately comes to mind related to groundwater quality is the wellhead protection topic. Wellhead protection plans are put together by a local government to do planning around the wellheads, their wells for their public water systems. Each wellhead protection plan is going to be different. They will be looking at what the situation is of physical factors in their particular location. That might be different from something, the next city 20 miles away. Might be different from something a city another 50 miles away. So to say you should have a setback from activity such and such from your wellhead, and that should be true all the way across, that's something that local governments need to deal with their wellhead protection plans. So our standards at this point say it must be consistent with the wellhead protection plan. We also suggest things like shouldn't be mining below the water table within the designated wellhead protection area. Okay, we need some more discussion on, is that an issue? Do other people feel that that's appropriate or not? We need to talk about that more with the Department of Health and other agencies, as well as the local governments on that. So yes, there are some things, a setback is a setback is a setback, but when it comes to how do you best protect groundwater, there's no clear-cut numerical value that we would just say you should do this and that would apply all over. That's just not appropriate. So you're absolutely right. There's going to be some numerical standards. The setbacks are the easiest example, but even those could change depending on the location and depending on what the local government thinks. But the groundwater issues are sort of, we're learning more and more about that all the time. And I think the standard, at this point, I'm thinking the standards is going to be more along the line of do the following things to find out what you think would be best, rather than we know what would be best in your community. Not to even talk about individual wells that aren't even part of a municipal water system that are also important. Okay, so that's not a wellhead protection plan, but that is an issue that needs to be addressed, and that's not actually specifically noted in the legislation. So that's one of those suggestions that, this is important too, we should consider that as well, even though it wasn't actually in the legislation. So that's where we're coming from right now, and we think that there's enough there to stimulate a good discussion and further research into it.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, you noted the fact that the legislature provided an October 1st deadline originally. It's been suggested by staff that we create a subcommittee, which I believe would inherently include that subcommittee being at public hearings. Public hearings require notification. I wonder if you could give us an idea what you're suggesting to the board would be the new second draft deadline.
Well, that's a good question. I actually would have to defer to what the board thinks we should do on that one. The October 1st deadline, I guess I feel like we met that to the extent that was humanly possible. We have a draft. We don't have it finished. We have developed some model standards. A lot more discussion is needed. To get that done by October 1st, we would have needed a lot more horses to pull a lot more carts than we had, and that's just the way life is. So I guess I will defer to the board discussion, the EQB, if you're going to form a subcommittee on the process. I don't really have a specific schedule in mind for that. I'm going to leave that up to the board to, construct the process for that.
John?
Mr. Chair and Brian, I think in the interest of thinking this through a little bit from my perspective and also knowing how interested citizens are in it being engaged in this, as well as getting local government input, I would suggest that we look at a early February deadline for sort of a next close to final version of these, so that the board could have something to work on as a subcommittee, just to get organized, get all the information, and then to receive input, respond to the input. I think we're going to need some time, and so I would anticipate sort of a February timeframe, 2014, for us to have something really with more robust public and local government input.
Brian, follow-up?
I would accept that timeline, given the fact that there are legal obligations when it comes to public hearings and just assembling the necessary team. I'm wondering, would there be any impact on any projects that are currently underway? Are there any local units of government that are anticipating these sooner to assist them in their permitting processes?
I haven't, Brian, been approached, and again, local units of government are pretty much free to establish their own criteria at this point in time, so I don't think there has been. And Bob, I don't know if you've had any contact with anyone saying, I can't wait. Guess not. Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, as the board, I think there are some out there that are keeping an eye on this to see what we come up with. I think the staff of those governments, those cities and counties, they know this is a big animal to wrestle with. I'm not aware of anybody who is just like waiting to do something till we're finished. I think there are people who are watching this and going through the process we go through. In some cases, some of them have gone through some of it already. Others are waiting for us to take the hits, as it were. So I think there's a continuum of expectations out there. I guess that's as close as I can come to answering that.
I think what I'd like to do is proceed with the public comment at this time, Jeff. And I just want to preface it by saying I totally understand why you're here today. You're never wrong about how you feel. And I assume that you felt that by establishing any kind of criteria in these guidelines, that we in fact established the floor. And that is not the case. And so I want to assure you that we will listen intently to your comments and also follow up with meetings across the area. So with that, I'd like to ask Dave Williams to come up. And I see that we have quite a few folks that have an interest in testifying today, so whatever you can do to move the process along, I would appreciate it. Welcome, Dave.